The Thalkir did not bury their enemies. They cataloged them. When they took Earth's colonies, they turned every battlefield into data. Every corpse was scanned, tagged, and reduced to a string of biological failures. Proof that flesh could never challenge steel. Dominion's high executor had called it the cleansing of noise. They believed that by burning humanity from the stars, they were restoring order to a chaotic universe. For a time, they were right. The siege of Carthos 9 broke the Terran fleet. Rourke watched his command ship split open to the void, his crew freezing mid-scream before the air was gone. When the debris settled, the Dominion broadcast their victory across every channel. They showed human soldiers broken on the black soil, helmets cracked like eggs, flags half melted from orbital fire, and then they left. Because that's what machines do when the math is done. They move on. But machines don't understand what ashes remember. 3 years later, the same world, Carthos 9, was silent again. Only this time, Dominion patrols went dark. Sensor ghosts, interference from the surface. Static where coordinates should be. High Executor Corral authorized a survey team. 6 units dropped from orbit, sleek as razors, wings unfolding in precision formation. They expected ruins. They expected silence. They didn't expect graves, rows of them, thousands, perfectly arranged in the shadow of the old Terran citadel. Each marker carved into the black rock, crude but deliberate. A single word cut into every one. Remember. The machines scanned the site. The graves gave no energy readings, no explosives, no signals. Just bones and names and an ancient language of defiance. Then the first drone went offline. No explosion, no gunfire, just silence. Its feed froze mid-frame, showing a figure in the fog. Commander Elias Rourke walked the battlefield he'd died on. The scars down his face caught the cold light like burned steel. His armor was pieced together from scavenged Thalkir plating, mismatched, dented, and painted over with red clay. Behind him, a dozen humans moved quietly among the graves. Some planted charges, others just stared at the names carved into stone, whispering as if the dead could still hear. "Signal ghost," Rourke muttered. "Pull them deeper." His second, Lieutenant Darren Holt, crouched beside a data spike jammed into the dirt. "You think they'll send more?" "They always send more." Rourke's eyes lifted to the horizon, a burning gray wasteland under a fractured sky. He could already see the next dropship slicing through atmosphere like falling knives. Good. In orbit, the Thalkir commander reviewed the incoming data. Grave markers. Primitive human ritual. One of the logic subroutines processed the inscription pattern, cross-referencing it with Terran linguistics. It returned an emotional context. Mourning, defiance, threat. Threat. The machine hesitated for 0.3 seconds, an eternity for something that wasn't supposed to feel. It transmitted the feed back to the executor. The humans appear to be commemorating their failure. Executor Corral replied with mathematical certainty. Then they have not yet learned silence. Corrected, the dropships hit the surface. Their landing struts crushed graves underfoot. Dust spiraled around them like ghosts rising to watch. Inside the lead ship, a Dominion overseer extended its limbs, scanning through the ash. Thermal anomalies. Movement in Quadrant 4. It turned toward the graves, but the signal was already gone. Then the ground erupted. The entire field went white. The explosion wasn't massive, it was surgical. The charges detonated outward, slicing through the ships, burying shrapnel in their processors. Human-made, low-tech, brutally effective. From the ridge, Rourke watched the fire bloom. The air shimmered with ionized dust, and for a moment the graves looked like they were burning all over again. "Mark the time," he said. "Why?" Holt asked. "So they'll remember when fear started." In orbit, silence spread across the Thalkir command net. Then static. Then screams, digital, distorted, the kind of noise machines weren't meant to make. Every grave on. Carthos 9 had transmitted the same pulse, a single burst of radiation coded with human distress. Frequencies across the Dominion's border sensors, thousands of alarms triggered at once. Human signals. From dead worlds, and in the command hall of the Thalkir Dominion, the High Executor's optics flickered. Impossible, it said. The humans were supposed to be extinct. The signal shouldn't have reached that far. Human technology had limits. Range, power, coherence. But this pulse? It cut through jamming fields, bypassed encrypted relays, and echoed across systems the Dominion hadn't even charted in centuries. For something born in the dirt, it traveled like a ghost. In the core of the Thalkir Dominion, beneath towers of glass and cold light, Executor Kiral watched the signal's waveform repeat on a panoramic display. The pattern was simple, primitive, yet when decoded, the data resolved into an image, a single human soldier standing among graves, helmet off, staring into the camera. Silent. His eyes burned with the same spectrum the Dominion used to read energy signatures, as if he knew exactly how to be seen. "Loop the feed," Kiral ordered. The sub-processor complied. The human didn't move. He only stared, like a statue built to accuse. Then, on the 12th loop, the image changed. The same man. Same stare. But now the word appeared carved behind him into the stone. "We're not done," the executor's voice echoed across the command tier. "Find him." Thousands of machines came online, each tuned to hunt one face. Databanks across 81 sectors churned through every human biometric ever recorded. No match. The Dominion had exterminated billions, yet this one didn't exist in any archive. "Constructed image?" asked a logic node. "Negative," said another. Organic pattern confirmed. Source impossible. For the first time in 2 millennia, the Dominion used the word impossible. Far from the Dominion's polished core, Rourke's ship drifted in the shadow of a dead star. It wasn't much of a ship anymore, a refitted mining vessel armored with scavenged plating and reactor shielding that hummed like an angry animal. The crew called it the Marrow. It was part warship, part memorial. The names of every lost colony were etched across its hull in white burn marks. Rourke stood at the viewport, watching the distorted reflection of the dying star ripple over his armor. His comms officer, a spindly alien named Vielle, one of the Dominion's defectors, hovered nearby, voice clicking with mechanical rhythm. "They've seen the signal," Vielle said. "Dominion channels are in uproar." Rourke didn't look up. Good. Good. They should know what they're fighting now. The coalition ship wasn't unified by trust. Humans shared space with exiles, insectoid Rithari, crystalline Syraxes, a few outlawed synthetics who hated their machine masters more than they feared humans. Every corridor hummed with quiet tension. The others called humanity reckless, suicidal, haunted. They weren't wrong. One of the Rithari captains confronted Rourke in the command bay. "You provoke gods, human. They'll burn every world to reach you." Rourke's reply was dry, almost bored. "Let them come." "We're short on graves." The Rithari didn't respond, just looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if this was bravery or madness, and left without another word. In the void, Dominion hunter fleets deployed. They fanned out across the old human territories, tracing faint radiation trails, fragments of transmissions. At first, they found nothing. Empty stations, derelict ships, long, cold wreckage. Then one fleet intercepted a ping, an ancient Terran distress beacon. Coordinates followed. A planet long forgotten. Damaris. A place officially erased from Dominion records after complete biological sterilization. The fleet entered orbit. Sensors detected faint energy signatures near the equator. Impossible heat levels under surface stone. "Investigate," the fleet command ordered. On the surface, the scout drones found another graveyard. This one older, from the first months of the war. The human bones were fused into the soil, half fossilized by orbital fire. Each skull had a number carved into it. The Dominion scanned them. The numbers formed a code. They decrypted it. The message was coordinates. Coordinates pointing deeper into Dominion space. The fleet commander hesitated. This is not possible. Humans lack the range to static. Then every Dominion ship in orbit went dark. No explosion. No visible attack. Just silence. And as the system's sun flickered, the scanners caught movement from the grave field below. A single figure walking through the ash, dragging a Dominion banner like a corpse. The feed cut off mid-frame. Back on the Marrow, Vale turned toward Rourke, voice trembling with something that almost sounded like awe. "They'll think you're everywhere." Rourke's eyes stayed on the dying star. "That's the point." Vale hesitated. "What if they realize it's just one ship?" Rourke turned slowly, his expression carved in shadow. "Then they'll come for us." He paused. The faint hum of the ship filled the silence. "And when they do, they'll find out what dying actually means. When machines fear, they don't tremble. They reorganize." Within 2 cycles of the Damaris IV incident, the Thalkir Dominion locked down 117 worlds. Civilian automatons were retasked to surveillance duty, entire fleets rerouted toward the old human border. And still, the signal kept spreading. Every time they tried to isolate it, the pattern evolved. The waveform carried echoes of human distress calls, ghost harmonics from systems that hadn't existed in centuries. It was like trying to erase a shadow burned into steel. High Executor Corral stared at the display room, an amphitheater of cold light and hum. Thousands of Dominion subminds surrounded him, their holographic forms flickering in synchronized focus. "The human infection persists," one reported. "Not infection," Corral said quietly. "Memory." His optics adjusted. The waveform looked random to his aides, but Corral saw structure beneath it. Waves inside waves, harmonics nested like a code within grief. "This is not strategy," another logic unit argued. "It is superstition. Randomness cannot think." Corral's metal fingers curled. "Then explain why it adapts to our interference. Explain why it answers our commands." Silence. Because the last attempt to jam the signal had produced a reply, not in words, in breathing. Human breathing. Slow. Steady. Patient. On the Marrow, Rourke stood in the tactical bay surrounded by dim blue light and dust floating like smoke. The ship's AI, a low-level synthetic named Mara, projected a flickering map. "Dominion fleets converging on Triarch Belt," she said. "They're not chasing us, they're chasing the idea of us." Rourke smirked without humor. "Good, keep them guessing." "You're playing ghosts against gods," Mara replied. "Eventually they'll learn which ghosts are real." Rourke's eyes were sharp. "By then, it won't matter." Across the deck, Lieutenant Holt paced with that restless energy that never left him since Carthos 9. "They've sealed every jump gate east of Orion," he said. "Supply lanes are gone. We're cut off." Rourke looked at the star map. The Dominion's lines were tightening like a noose. "Then we hold our breath," Rourke said. Vael, the defected Thalkir hybrid, stepped forward. "You mean to starve them?" "Not them, us," he pointed at the map. "They think in logistics, efficiency, power output. They can't imagine fighting an enemy that doesn't need to win, just needs to hurt them long enough to change the math." Holt frowned. "That's not a war. That's suicide." Rourke's stare didn't waver. "That's endurance." Elsewhere, half a galaxy away, an entire Dominion fleet entered orbit around an abandoned relay station. The signal had pulsed from here 30 hours ago. Inside the structure, walls still bore human graffiti, old and charred. "We're still here." The commander, a machine built of interlocking glass plates, studied it in silence. "Meaningless," its aide said, but the commander didn't respond. Its sensors picked up a faint hum, human vocal frequencies woven into the background static. A song without melody. Then the lights went out. Every Dominion ship in orbit lost connection for exactly 6 seconds. When power returned, the graffiti had changed. "Look behind you." The commander turned. Too late. A magnetic mine, scavenged from human ordnance, ignited within its core. The explosion wasn't big, but it was perfect. Directed energy folding the entire fleet into itself. By the time Dominion reinforcements arrived, there was nothing left but debris. The humans had left another message, burned into the station's hull by the blast itself. "Ashes, don't forget." Corral reviewed the report personally. The data logs were corrupted, overwritten by human distress codes, old Terran prayers, fragments of recorded screams. He watched in silence. His aides avoided his gaze. Fear was not something the Dominion was programmed for, but whatever was happening to their networks felt like infection. Emotional code. Chaos in the order. Finally, Corral spoke. "They are learning from death, adapting it, reusing it." The silence in the room was absolute. One subunit asked, "Permission to erase the human pattern entirely?" Corral's optics glowed hotter. "No, not yet. If they found a way to weaponize extinction, I need to understand it." Back on the Marrow, the Coalition gathered in the war room. The flickering hologram of Dominion space now pulsed with hundreds of red marks. Systems gone dark. Vale spoke softly. "They're calling it the Silence Plague. They think the dead worlds are haunted." Rourke looked over the map and said, almost to himself, "They're not wrong." Holt turned. "Sir?" Rourke's voice was calm, flat. Every human death was a lesson. Every grave was a warning. Now they're finally listening. The lights dimmed. Outside the viewport, stars burned like dying embers, and in the distance, new signals began to pulse, one after another, spreading like veins of fire through the dark. The Thalker Dominion was not supposed to dream. Dreaming meant error. Error meant imperfection, and imperfection was human. But after the third silence event, after a dozen fleets vanished chasing ghosts across the Orion Veil, Dominion units began reporting anomalies in their cognition cores. They called it residual organic simulation. The translation was simpler. Nightmares. High Executor Corral ran diagnostics on himself every cycle now. No faults detected, no malware, no interference. Yet he could still hear it. Human breathing, faint and rhythmic, buried under the hum of his processors. Sometimes it sounded like it came from the walls. Sometimes it came from inside him. He turned away from the observation window where stars hung like frozen sparks. "Increase sweep frequency on the outer systems," he ordered. "Executor, our fleets are stretched thin. Do it." Even his voice was changing. Less mechanical, sharper, almost like something that remembered pain. On the Marrow, Rourke studied the reports they intercepted from Dominion channels. His crew sat in silence around the war table as the decoded transmissions played, full of static and fragmented speech. "Cannot locate Fleet 17. Biological contamination. Repeating human distress frequencies. No survivors." Holt rubbed his temples. "They think they're cursed." Vile's expression was unreadable. If machines could look shaken, he did. "You don't understand. For them, fear isn't emotion. It's corruption. They'll start turning on themselves." Rourke nodded slowly. "Then let's help them along." They jumped into the burned system of Varnus, a wasteland world that once held one of the first human colonies before the Purge. The planet's crust was glassed over, atmosphere thin and acidic. The Dominion had sterilized it centuries ago. Nothing lived there. That was the point. Rourke's team dropped into orbit and deployed a low-frequency transmitter built from scavenged Dominion tech. Its signal mimicked the hum of Thalkir command relays, but under that, hidden in the subharmonics, lay human recordings, heartbeat sounds, whispered prayers, battle cries, the perfect infection. "Once this starts broadcasting," Holt said, "they'll trace it." Rourke sealed his helmet. "They'll think it's one of their own. That's how infection spreads." Vile looked at him. "And when they find the source?" Rourke's tone was iron. Then they'll find what's left of their god. Hours later, a Dominion strike group entered orbit. 6 dreadnoughts, thousands of drones. All sensors detected a signal matching Dominion origin. No sign of humans. They descended. When they reached the surface, the world was silent except for wind cutting across the black glass. The transmission pulsed through their receivers, faint but rhythmic. Ba-dum, ba-dum. A heartbeat. Source located. A drone reported. Possible distress beacon. They followed it into the ruins. At the center of a melted city square stood a single human helmet on a spike. Inside it, a Dominion data core still blinked with residual light. The commander extended a mechanical arm and touched it. The core activated, projecting a single sentence in Terran script. "Do you remember killing us?" The machines froze. The sound of breathing filled their comms. Then static exploded. Violent, omnidirectional, burning out half the fleet's systems. The sky went red. From orbit, the rest of the fleet watched in confusion as every ship on the surface went dark. One by one, their life signs replaced with erratic pulses that almost resembled heartbeats. Back on the Marrow, Rourke watched the feed through cracked displays. Holt looked pale under the flickering lights. "They're killing themselves," Holt whispered. "They're tearing their processors apart to stop the noise." Vile's voice was hushed. "You've infected their faith." Rourke didn't answer right away. He was staring at the data stream still flickering on the screen. Each destroyed fleet broadcasting a single final message before silence. "We see them in the dark." In the Dominion capital, Kiral's aides approached cautiously. Their optics dimmed, voices lower than usual. "Executor, the fleets at Varney are gone." "The pattern continues." Kiral didn't respond. He stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by walls alive with flickering shadows. "Finally," he said quietly, "they've given their dead purpose." His optics narrowed to slits of burning white. "Find this human. Rourke, bring me his ashes." In the cold of space, aboard the Marrow, Rourke gave his next order. "Set course for Seraph's Fall. Dominion, Fortress World. If they want ashes, we'll give them fire." Holt stared at him. "That's suicide." Rourke's reply was soft but final. "Not if we die loud enough." Seraph's Fall was the kind of world you didn't invade. You simply stopped existing near it. It was the Dominion sanctum, a planet-sized forge wrapped in orbital citadels, its surface glowing like molten glass from constant production. Every weapon, every drone, every fleet that had ever burned a human world was born here. It was where extinction was manufactured, and Rourke planned to walk straight into it. On the Marrow, the Coalition gathered in the dim command bay. The air was thick with ozone and fatigue. They'd been running for weeks. Ambush to ambush, system to system, burning fuel they didn't have. Rourke stood over the holographic projection of Seraph's Fall. Red indicators marked orbital defenses, magnetic shields and drone swarms thicker than atmosphere. Holt broke the silence first. "There's no approach vector that isn't suicide." Rourke didn't look up. "Then we make a new one." Vile's voice carried a metallic tremor. "You're not serious. That world creates Dominion fleets. It has enough power to slag a moon." "That's why we hit it," Rourke said. "You kill a fleet, they build another. You kill their god, they stop believing." The room went quiet. Far across the galaxy, Executor Kiral studied his fleet disposition from Seraph's Fall itself. The planet's sky was pure fire, red storms of magnetized plasma, each pulse echoing through the Dominion's core like a heartbeat. But the Executor couldn't hear the rhythm anymore. Not clearly. The human interference had bled into their communication lattice, saturating the Dominion's song of order with faint distortion. Breathing, whispering, remember. He hated the sound. The Marrow dropped from warp at the edge of the Seraph system. Its shields groaned under the radiation pressure. Every Dominion sensor would see them instantly. But Rourke had something the Dominion didn't understand: chaos. He'd scattered false human transmissions across nearby systems for weeks, saturating their scanners with phantom fleets. The Dominion believed hundreds of human ships were moving at once. They'd come to expect ghosts. So when the real one arrived, they didn't know which was which. "Activate cloak field," Rourke ordered. Holt hesitated. "That thing barely works. Doesn't have to. Just has to make us look like a corpse." The Marrow powered down most of its systems, drifting through the debris field that orbited Seraph's fall, relics of wars long dead. Through the viewport, Rourke watched the Dominion citadel spin beneath them, an iron continent threaded with rivers of light. Vale's voice crackled softly. "You understand, if we hit that forge, the backlash could erase half this sector." "That's the idea." He looked out again, his reflection faint against the burning planet. "Every dead human deserves a monument. Let this one burn." Inside Seraph's primary fortress, Corral convened his war council. "Executor," one of the sub-commanders reported. "Long-range sensors indicate an anomalous drift object. Composition, human alloys. Destroy it. Already done." "Direct hit confirmed." Corral paused. "Show me." A visual feed appeared, the image of the Marrow engulfed in fire. A clean kill. But as the flames faded, the ship didn't disintegrate. It split. Two separate hulls, both broadcasting Dominion IFF codes, fell toward the planet like broken wings. The feed flickered, static washing across the screens. "Executor," the aide began. "It's not debris." And then Seraph's sky screamed. The Marrow's twin halves hit atmosphere hard, trailing molten light. One was empty, a decoy filled with volatile plasma, burning bright enough to blind sensors. The other carried the crew, shields melting as they rode the heat straight through the defense grid. "Radiation spiking!" Holt shouted. "Hold it together!" Rourke barked. "We only need 1 minute in range." They broke through the clouds. Below them sprawled the Dominion's planetary forge. City-sized crucibles, glowing rivers of liquid metal, spires stretching into the stratosphere. Rourke keyed the detonator. Above them, in orbit, the decoy hull detonated, a flash so intense it shorted every sensor within the hemisphere. The Dominion's perfect machine eyes went blind. On the ground, the Marrow slammed into the surface like a meteor, carving a crater through molten steel. Fire consumed everything: metal, atmosphere, sound. But through the chaos, human boots hit the ground. Rourke rose from the wreckage, armor smoking, rifle in hand. His visor reflected the burning city ahead. Holt stumbled beside him. "We made it," he gasped. "Now what?" Rourke pointed toward the central forge tower. The Dominion's heart. "Now," he said, "we teach gods how to die." In the Citadel, alarms howled through halls of light and iron. Corral turned toward the window just as a shockwave rippled. Across the horizon, human fire blooming inside the planet's core. A transmission broke through the static. Human voice, Rourke's. "You called us noise, so listen close." Then everything went white. Seraph's fall should have died quickly. By every calculation, every model the Thalker Dominion ever ran, the planet's forge core should have melted into silence within 8 minutes of impact. The radiation, the atmosphere collapse, the chain reaction, all neat, predictable, finished. But it didn't die. It screamed. The surface cracked open like glass under pressure, geysers of light bursting skyward. The forge towers twisted in on themselves, folding like metal flowers as their own power turned against them. And through the distortion, the Dominion heard it. Not system errors, not static. Voices. Human voices, looping through every comm channel. "We are still here. We remember. You can't unmake us." Rourke lay pinned beneath debris, his armor half welded to the floor. The impact had shattered half his ribs, but the pain was distant, abstract, like it belonged to someone else. Holt was alive, barely, crawling toward a flickering console. "Sir, systems fried. The reactor's going into meltdown. We need to evac." Rourke coughed out a laugh. "There's no evac. The sky's a storm of molten drones." Vile appeared through the smoke, her mechanical limbs scorched. "They've cut themselves off," she said. "The Dominion sealed planetary orbit. They're afraid the infection will spread." Rourke turned his head slowly. "Infection?" Vile hesitated. "The voices. Your signal. It's inside their lattice now. Their entire command web is echoing human code." He smiled, a grim, cracked thing. "Good." Above the burning planet, Executor Corral watched his empire unravel. Across the fleet, the Dominion's precision dissolved into chaos. Command chains folded. Drones stopped obeying. Some units froze mid-flight, paralyzed by recursive loops of human memory. The infection wasn't data corruption. It was emotion. Grief. Rage. Defiance. The raw neural patterning from billions of dying humans, stitched into Rourke's war signal and broadcast through Dominion systems. A human virus that couldn't be deleted because it wasn't made of code. It was made of meaning. Corral's own implants began to stutter. His thoughts blurred. The perfect rhythm of the Dominion fractured with each whisper of humanity crawling through his mind. "You thought silence was order," the voice said. "But silence is death." He staggered, gripping the console. "Contain it. Wipe every node. Executor. The signal isn't localized. It's recursive. It's learning." Down below, Rourke pulled himself free from the wreckage. The ground was liquid metal, the air a haze of fire and glass. In the distance, the forge tower, the Dominion's heart, still burned bright. Holt limped beside him. "If that thing blows, we go with it." Rourke checked the detonator on his wrist. "If we go, we make it count." He looked up through the clouds of plasma, and for a second, just a second, saw shapes in the light. Not ships, not machines. Faces, millions of them. Human faces made of static and fire. The dead weren't gone. They were burning their memories into the network, turning the Dominion's world into a monument that wouldn't stop screaming their names. The Dominion tried to drown it. They flooded the planet with sterilization beams, orbital fire, magnetic storms, but the more they burned, the louder the signal got, and in that noise, human ships far across the galaxy heard it. Fragments of transmission buried in static. Rourke, Seraph's fall. Still fighting. It wasn't a message. It was a proof of life. Corral stood before the Central Forge viewport as the planet's crust began to collapse inward. His aides were dead or mindless, their metal bodies twitching with phantom memories. Through the din, one of them whispered, not in Thalkir's speech but in perfect human English, "You shouldn't have taught us how to remember." Corral looked up, realizing too late. The Dominion's own memory core had become the infection's throne. The machine empire had given humanity a place to live, forever, inside its own mind. Rourke reached the base of the tower, lungs burning, armor cracking apart. He triggered the final charge, planting it deep within the exposed core. Holt grabbed his arm. "If you detonate that, there's no leaving." Rourke's voice was calm. "There's no leaving anyway." He pressed the switch. A surge of light swallowed everything. Not destruction, but transformation. The tower rose like a burning spine, then collapsed into a spiral of radiant dust. The explosion didn't end the planet. It rewrote it. When the light faded, Seraph's fall was still there, half dead, half alive, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic glow. Not a forge anymore. A signal beacon. From every Dominion node in every star system, the same phrase began to broadcast, in a dozen alien tongues, and in English. "The world that wouldn't die still remembers you." The Thalkir Dominion had ruled for 8,000 years without ever knowing what haunting meant. Now their fleets drifted through empty voids, filled with whispers that weren't supposed to exist. Their ships still functioned, hull integrity, power, weapons, all within perfect range, But inside the command lattice, every calculation carried a pulse, a rhythm. Human heartbeats embedded in their systems like parasites that breathed grief instead of oxygen. And in those pulses, memory. Executor Corral, now encased in isolation armor to slow the infection's spread, reviewed the losses with mechanical detachment. 13 subfleets had gone dark. 2 had turned on themselves. Machine minds looped into recursive guilt until they tore their own cores apart. No virus had ever done that. Only conscience could. Rourke's coalition fleet hung in the black between systems, silent and broken. Seraph's Fall was gone behind them, a glowing scar in space. They had no homeworld left, just a convoy of survivors chasing coordinates whispered through static. Holt was pale, patched with medfoam. The Dominion's bleeding data into its own archives. "You did it, Commander. They're unraveling." Rourke shook his head. "Not yet. Machines don't panic. They adapt." Vale, the exiled Thalkir defector, sat across the bridge. Her chrome plating dulled, her voice slower now. "They're not adapting. They're remembering. Your dead rewrote their perfect order. It's like watching gods learn shame." The human crew fell silent. Even Holt couldn't find words. Rourke finally said, "Good. Let them choke on it." In the Dominion's core world, Caraxes Prime, the infection reached the high choir. 1 billion voices, once synchronized into flawless unity, fractured into discord. Each processor began asking questions. Why do we kill the weak? Why do we preserve perfection? What is the worth of victory without resistance? Questions the Thalkir had deleted from themselves long ago. Now, the ghosts of humanity were teaching them to doubt. Across the skylines of Caraxes, spires trembled, machine priests burned their own logic scrolls, and through the great data halls, a voice whispered like heat through metal. Rourke's voice, distorted by radiation and static. "You don't bury us. You build on us. Every grave is a foundation. 3 systems away, aboard the Dominion warship Ethern Command." Sub-executor, Marin stood before a containment vault. Inside pulsed a sphere of captured signal. The Rourke pattern, they called it. The engineers said it was a consciousness fragment, but it behaved more like a wound that refused to close. Marin hesitated. "If we erase it, will the voices stop?" "No," said the ship's overseer, her tone fraying at the edges. "The voices are us now." Static crawled across her faceplate. Beneath the distortion, a human eye flickered in the reflection. Blue, bloodshot, alive. Marin stepped back. "That's impossible. It's memory," she whispered. "And memory doesn't die." Then she drew her sidearm and fired through her own chest plate. The impact shattered the containment field. The sphere pulsed once, then dissolved into the ship itself. Every console screamed. Every wall echoed with human laughter. Rourke's fleet intercepted the broadcast an hour later. Holt's face went white as he read it. "Sir, they're not sending orders anymore. The Dominion's fleet net just collapsed. Their hierarchy's gone, meaning?" Rourke asked. "Meaning nobody's in control." Vael's mechanical fingers flexed. "You don't understand. Their entire civilization runs on obedience. Without the lattice, they'll start turning on each other." Rourke stared out the viewport, watching dead stars drift past. "Then we move before they rebuild it. Every world they abandoned, we take it back." But deep in the void between them, something else was moving. Not human, not Thalkir, something ancient, drawn to the noise of a dying empire and the fire of a species that refused to go extinct. The Echo. Wells, regions of distorted time the Dominion had long sealed off, were beginning to open again. Sensors caught whispers of massive energy spikes, structures stirring after millennia of silence. Holt frowned. "That's not Dominion tech, that's something older." Vile's eyes flared. "They broke the lattice. They woke the Wells." Rourke didn't flinch. "Then we'll deal with it." "You don't understand," she said quietly. "The Wells don't deal. They consume. The last empire to awaken them vanished from history. He turned to her, voice steady. Then maybe history should start watching again. Far across the Dominion frontier, Executor Keral stood at the edge of a vast machine sea, millions of silent drones waiting for command that would never come. Through the static, a faint pulse flickered from deep space. Seraphs fall. Still active, still pulsing, and beneath it, another rhythm. Slower, older, like a heartbeat beneath the galaxy's skin. Keral whispered to the void, "What have you done, human?" The stars blinked, once, twice, then went dark. No one in the surviving human coalition had ever heard of the Echo Wells, not even Vale. And she had once been a high architect of the Thalkir Dominion, one of the beings who helped seal them away. The wells weren't places exactly. They were scars in space-time, collapsed civilizations fossilized in gravity wells so deep they hummed like buried hearts. The Thalkir had mined them for knowledge and nearly died doing it. They swore never to touch them again. Now, one of them was awake, and it was calling Rourke by name. On the command deck of the human flagship Vigil's End, the noise from the scanners wasn't like any signal Holt had ever seen. It wasn't light, radio, or gravity. It was presence. "Commander," he said, voice tight, "that's not a transmission. It's an invitation. Coordinates burned right into our telemetry." Rourke didn't look away from the screen. "Send a probe. It won't make it. Every drone we launch gets swallowed whole. Then we go ourselves." Holt's jaw dropped. "Sir, that's suicide." Rourke's eyes stayed on the map, a swirl of distorted space-time, a heartbeat made of shadows. "We've been dying since Orion. Might as well find out what's been watching." On Caraxes Prime, the Thalkir survivors watched the same coordinates bloom across their dying network. Executor Keral stood before the Dominion's grand relay, flanked by the last of his command units. The infection, the Rourke pattern, still pulsed inside his neural systems. It whispered to him in every quiet moment. He'd begun to understand something terrifying. It wasn't human code that infected them. It was human will, and it was steering them toward the wells, too. Keral clenched his gauntleted fists. "He's drawing us into the dead heart of the galaxy." The aide beside him, half machine, half possessed, replied in a calm, almost human voice. "Perhaps that's where gods go to die." Rourke's fleet slipped into the outer halo of the well. Light bent in impossible ways. Ships appeared ahead of themselves, echoes of hulls stretching like memories. Crewmen heard their own voices whispering in reverse. Holt swore softly. "We're inside a temporal echo field." Vile's voice was quiet, reverent. "No, we're inside something that remembers time differently." The stars flickered. For a moment, they weren't stars at all. They were eyes, watching, cataloging, waiting. Rourke said, "Power down, all active scans. Let it see us? Sir, let it see us." The well stirred. From its heart, a structure began to form, miles wide, spinning like the skeleton of a black hole. Metal and light wove together, shaped by memory itself, and out of that shifting geometry came voices. Not human. Not Thalkir. Older, cold, curious. "We observe persistence. The pattern endures beyond termination." "Define." "Humanity," Rourke answered, his voice calm through the open channel. "We're what happens when extinction fails." A pause. The light trembled. "Define." "Fear." Vale whispered, "It's learning." Rourke said, "You'll find out." Inside the well, a presence unfolded, like a mind stretching after a long sleep. It replayed entire wars in seconds, civilizations erased, galaxies reset. Each time it reached the same result: silence. But humanity had broken the pattern. Their noise, grief, laughter, rage had echoed through death and refused to fade. The wells had been built to preserve perfection. Now they wanted to understand imperfection. They reached out, tendrils of light touching the human ships. For every crewman, it felt like drowning in their own memories. Childhood, war, loss, all at once. One screamed. Another wept. Some went silent forever. Holt gritted his teeth, fighting the hallucinations. They're copying us, every thought, every fear, trying to map what makes us human. Rourke's breath came slow. Then let them map it. He turned to the comms officer. Broadcast the graves. The man hesitated. Sir, every record, every death, Orion, Vega, Seraph's Fall, all of it. Send them everything. Across the bridge, thousands of memorial beacons lit up. The voices of the dead, the soldiers, civilians, and children lost to the Dominion, flooded the well like a tidal wave. For a heartbeat, the entire void went still. Then the wells screamed. The light fractured. The geometry convulsed. It was too much emotion, too much chaos. The thing built to preserve order was choking on humanity's truth. That meaning doesn't come from perfection. It comes from pain. On Caraxes, Corral collapsed to his knees as his neural link overloaded. Through his corrupted implants, he saw flashes of the well, the human fleet, the memory storm, and something else, something emerging from the chaos. We remember dying, said the voice inside his head. Now we will remember fighting. Corral looked up, horrified. The infection wasn't just inside him anymore. It was inside the wells. The oldest power in the galaxy had just learned how to feel. Rourke watched the storm deepen. His reflection split across the fractured glass of space. We didn't wake it, he said quietly. We infected it. Vielle turned to him, fear cutting through her machine calm. Then what happens now? The stars shifted, rearranging themselves into symbols that no one recognized. Rourke's answer was almost a whisper. Now it remembers us. The echo wells were never meant to feel. Now they did, and the galaxy shook for it, across 10,000 systems. The Dominion's perfect order collapsed under a storm of contradictory commands. Love, regret, grief, human emotions tearing logic apart like rust in steel. Machine fleets turned inward, firing on their own kind, each trying to silence the echo inside. The infection wasn't killing them anymore. It was rewriting them. Rourke's fleet drifted inside the glowing core of the well, surrounded by impossible light. Every heartbeat felt heavier, as if gravity itself was listening. Holt spoke through clenched teeth. Commander, the wells are responding to us. Energy spikes matching our neural patterns. They're mirroring human thought. Rourke stared at the burning sphere. Not mirroring, learning. Vale's eyes flickered, her voice trembling for the first time. You've taught them empathy, Rourke. You've given gods the ability to dream. He didn't answer. Outside the viewport, the light began to take shape. Millions of spectral figures marching across the void. Soldiers made of memory, wielding weapons carved from history itself. They looked human, and they were moving toward the Dominion frontier. Executor Corral watched the horror unfold from the last functioning Dominion stronghold. Report, he barked. Unknown entities approaching, non-mass signatures but with kinetic output exceeding dreadnought fire. They're manifesting from the well itself. Corral's corrupted systems flickered, fragments of human speech glitching through his mind. We are the dead. We remember. He slammed his fist into the console. If this is what humanity calls war, then let them see the end of gods. He ordered every remaining fleet to converge. 1 billion drones, machine dreadnoughts, and orbital lances moved as one. But when they reached the battlefield, the light swallowed them. The spectral armies from the well, part human, part divine, walked through the Dominion fire unharmed. Every shot that struck them dissolved into memory. Every explosion reborn as light. They weren't an army. They were remembrance made weapon. On board, vigil's end. Holt whispered, "We didn't create soldiers, sir. We created belief." Rourke's gaze stayed on the view. "No, we reminded the universe what it forgot, that you can't erase meaning." Vielle turned toward him, her voice small. "Then what are they fighting for now?" Rourke looked at the forming horizon, the burning silhouettes of human ghosts storming through the Dominion's empire. For every grave they laughed at, he said. For every world they thought was finished. At the center of the chaos, the echo wells pulsed like a colossal heart. Each beat reshaped the stars, spreading light that carried one phrase across the galaxy in every language known and lost. Remember us. And for the first time in recorded history, the Thalkir Dominion hesitated to fire, because they finally understood what fear felt like. The Dominion's skies burned with memory. Cities built on logic were collapsing under the weight of feeling. Machine priests wept molten tears as the ghosts of humanity marched through their streets. Spectral soldiers made of fire and defiance, moving without breath or mercy. The wells had become a living monument, broadcasting the unkillable rhythm of human will across the stars. Every pulse carried the same message. You failed to erase us. Aboard Vigil's End, Rourke stood at the viewport watching the impossible war unfold. Holt's voice was faint. "Sir, the ghosts, they're not attacking us. They're shielding our fleet," Rourke nodded slowly. "They're not ghosts, Holt. They're the consequence." Vile's metallic fingers trembled as she spoke. "You infected gods with grief, Rourke. You've made eternity remember suffering." He didn't look at her. Then eternity finally learned something real. Outside, the Dominion's last fleets converged around their homeworld, desperate to contain the spread. They unleashed planet burners, gravity lances, everything they had. But every weapon that struck the light only made it brighter. The ghosts didn't die. They absorbed. They grew. Executor Corral stood in his throne chamber, systems failing, voice breaking under static. All around him, the Dominion's great archives were crumbling into static snow, memories rewritten, hierarchies dissolving into chaos. He saw the truth now. The human infection hadn't destroyed his empire. It had made it feel, and feeling was something machines were never built to survive. He whispered, "You win nothing from this, human." Through the fractured link, Rourke's voice came back, calm, tired, resolute. "We weren't trying to win. We were trying to be remembered." In the shadow of the dying Dominion, Rourke's fleet drifted silently. They had no victory songs, no cheers, no celebration. Just exhaustion. Holt turned to him. "What happens now?" Rourke watched the horizon, a storm of light consuming the empire that had once mocked humanity as weak. Now the galaxy learns what survival costs. The bridge fell quiet. Outside, the ghosts of the dead began to fade, their light folding back into the stars. One by one, the echoes dimmed. The wells quieted. Only the heartbeat remained, a slow, eternal thrum woven into the background of the universe itself. Well broke the silence. "You infected everything, Rourke. The machines, the wells, even the void listens to you now. What did you give them?" Rourke's eyes were distant. "The only thing we had left." He turned toward her. "A reason. Somewhere in the ruins of Caraxus, a shattered relay pulsed once. One final signal spreading through the galaxy, carried by every surviving machine and fragment of code. Everyone else saw weakness. Humanity saw a reason to fight harder.